Okay, welcome to Web Accessibility for Content Providers. My name is Todd McGill. I'm with Strategic Communications. If you have any questions on this material, you can email me at tmcgill@uci.edu, or you can give me a ring at 824-7919. This presentation is adapted from another presentation titled A Principles-Based Approach to Web Accessibility that was given by Jared Smith and Jonathan Whiting of WebAIM. Okay, this is part one. And here we're going to give you a little bit of background on accessibility, and I'll include what accessibility is and why it's important, how it applies to you. I'll describe some assistive technologies, I'll go over our responsibilities, and I'll also introduce the POUR guidelines. Okay, so what is accessibility? On screen is a good definition. Development of information systems flexible enough to accommodate the needs of the broadest range of users, regardless of age or disability. Additionally, the POUR guidelines are a good insight to accessibility, and those POUR guidelines are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. I'll go over these guidelines in more detail later in the presentation. So why is accessibility important? A significant number of people have a disability that affects computer use. These disabilities could be vision-related, or hearing, cognitive, motor, or seizure disabilities. Accessible websites can reach all these populations, and there are some technical benefits as well. For example, they play very well with search engines and have better cross-browser and cross-device compatibility. So how does this apply to you? Many of you input your content with the CMS, and that stands for Content Management System. There are a few flavors on campus, but the one I'll be discussing is Cascade. So if I say the CMS, I'm specifically referring to Cascade. One of the tools that Cascade offers is a WYSIWYG. That stands for What You See is What You Get. And what a WYSIWYG does is allow you to directly edit the code on an HTML page. Because you have editing capabilities of the code, you then have control over the accessibility characteristics of that page. Assistive technologies are tools people use to compensate for some disability. They include screen readers, screen magnification, speech recognition software, using a keyboard as a mouse, and there are others. On the right you see some of the assistive technologies built into Mac OS X. So, when we code a page to be accessible, we're coding it to work well with these assistive technologies. So what are our responsibilities? To begin, I'll give you a brief description of some milestones in accessibility standards. We start with the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. This is a time before the web was widely used, so the applicability of ADA to the web is a bit fuzzy. But nonetheless, this marks the first real effort to address accessibility through legislation. In 1998, we see the adoption of what is commonly referred to as Section 508. This is an amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it specifically addresses accessibility with regard to electronic and information technology. Although the scope of Section 508 is a bit limited, and it technically only applies to federal agencies, it is a de facto standard and foundation for subsequent standards and guidelines. Next, we have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. These guidelines were drafted in 1999 and updated to version 2.0 in 2008. WCAG is a technology-agnostic and principles-based approach to accessibility. This means that the guidelines describe accessibility goals without describing exactly how to achieve these goals. This is good because as technology advances, the guidelines don't become outdated. WCAG categorizes these goals by priority level, with A being the most basic and AAA being the most advanced. So which guidelines do we use? At minimum, Section 508. But WCAG 2.0 level AA is what we should really strive for. So as I mentioned earlier, accessibility can also be thought of in terms of the POUR guidelines, which are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that your content can be seen, heard, or experienced in some way. This affects those who are blind, have low vision, are colorblind, deaf, or hard of hearing. Some strategies for creating perceivable content include using linear and semantic markup, having meaningful link text, including alt text for images, associating table headers with their corresponding data, providing sufficient contrast and color, and not using color to convey information. Operable means your content can be properly interacted with. This affects those who face challenges with mouse use, repetition, fatigue, timing, or motion. Operable content is largely a developer concern, but you can help by applying a logical reading order to your content. Also, be aware of including strobing animations that may trigger a seizure. Understandable means that your content makes sense. This affects not only those with cognitive disabilities, but really everybody. Some strategies for creating understandable content include using linear and semantic markup, applying a logical reading order, using consistent language, and being as brief as appropriate. Robustness involves cross-browser and cross-device compatibility. This is a technical concern that you can let your developers worry about. We'll pick back up in part 2, where I'll discuss creating accessible markup.